We're on the ferry crossing over to the Isle of Mull, and if you've never done this journey before, it's one of those quiet moments that stays with you. There's something about being on the water, watching the land you're heading toward slowly grow bigger, that feels genuinely ancient. People have been making this crossing in one form or another for thousands of years. Mull isn't remote in the way the far north of Scotland is remote. It's only a 45-minute crossing from Oban, and the foot passenger fare is around £5 each way. But the moment you're on the water, you feel the psychological shift. You're leaving the mainland. You're going somewhere that operates on its own terms. We're now in Tobermory, after taking the 45-minute bus journey from Craignure ferry terminal. The ferry doesn't actually dock here in town. It arrives at Craignure on the other side of the island, so the bus journey is part of the experience, whether you like it or not. But it's a pleasant enough ride through the Mull countryside, and it drops you right into the heart of things. We're walking along the waterfront path here, with the sound of Mull off to the right, passing a small pier area with boats moored up. It's a gentle introduction to the pace of the place. Nobody seems to be in any particular hurry, which is something you notice quickly on the islands. There's a different rhythm here. Not laziness, just a different relationship with time that the mainland tends to beat out of people. And then, at the end of this path, you get your first proper look across the water at Tobermory town itself. That iconic row of brightly painted buildings stacked up against the hillside. What a lot of visitors don't realise is that none of this is accidental. Tobermory isn't an ancient settlement that evolved organically over centuries. It was designed. In 1788, an organisation called the British Fishery Society, essentially a government-backed development body, decided to build a brand new fishing port here from scratch. The main street here is worth taking slowly. It's almost entirely independent businesses. You won't find the usual high street chains here. Places like this soap shop are representative of how the island economy works now. Mull's population is only around 3,000 people. Tourism is the engine, and the businesses that thrive are the ones that offer something genuinely local, something you can't get anywhere else. The Society had identified this bay as one of the finest natural harbours on the entire west coast of Scotland. The plan was straightforward: build a functional fishing town, attract settlers, get the herring trade going, and bring economic life to a part of Scotland that had been struggling since the aftermath of the Jacobite risings. What makes it remarkable is the sheer physical effort involved. Where the main street now sits was nothing but a steep, rocky cliff face, dropping straight into the water. They had to cut into the hillside and reclaim land from the sea just to create the ground to build on. The engineer behind the layout was Thomas Telford, the same Thomas Telford who built the Caledonian Canal, the Menai Bridge, and hundreds of miles of Highland roads. A man who basically spent his career rewriting the physical landscape of Scotland. The result is what you're looking at now. A neat, deliberate little Georgian town, clinging to the edge of Mull, still going strong nearly 240 years later. The shift from a fishing economy to a tourism economy is a story that plays out across all the Hebridean islands, and it's not a simple one. At its peak in 1831, Mull had a population of over 10,000 people. Then came the potato famine, and then the clearances, the systematic eviction of crofting communities by landowners who decided sheep were more profitable than people. By the 1900s, the population had collapsed so severely that there were more sheep on Mull than humans. That's not a figure of speech. The islands essentially emptied. The people who left went to Glasgow, to Canada, America, Australia, or New Zealand, and they took their culture with them. Which is part of why you find Highland games in places like Nova Scotia, and Gaelic spoken in parts of Cape Breton Island in Canada to this day. Tobermory is very walkable and very compact. The entire main street takes maybe 10 minutes to walk end to end, but the surrounding island of Mull is actually the fourth largest island in Scotland. This building was constructed as a church in 1878, but is now an Italian restaurant called The Gallery, which also has a bar, hosts arts events, and features live music. In the autumn of 1588, a large Spanish ship limped into this bay. The Spanish Armada, that famous fleet sent by Philip II of Spain to invade England, had just been comprehensively defeated in the English Channel by the English Navy, and then further battered by catastrophic storms rounding the north of Scotland. Ships were scattered, damaged, and desperately seeking provisions for the long voyage home around the top of Britain and back to Spain. This particular vessel, known today as the San Juan de Sicilia, though historians have argued about its exact name for centuries, anchored right here in Tobermory Bay. The ship's officer struck a deal with the local clan chief, Maclean of Duart Castle, which you can actually see from the ferry crossing. The Spanish would receive the supplies they needed, fresh water, food, in exchange for lending their soldiers to help Maclean deal with some of his local rivals. And so, for over a month, several hundred Spanish soldiers were essentially running military operations on behalf of a Hebridean clan chief, raiding nearby islands, including Rum and Egg. History at its strangest. Then, in early November 1588, as the ship was finally preparing to leave, there was an explosion on board. The ship burned and sank, coming to rest about 300 yards from where the pier now stands. 2 men were on the section of the ship that blew off, and remarkably, both survived. What caused the explosion has never been definitively settled. The official Spanish account suggested it was an accident during the unloading of gunpowder. Scottish records, on the other hand, hinted that it was deliberately destroyed at the instigation of Lachlan Maclean himself, possibly because he wanted to prevent the return of something that was on board. Because according to the documents held by the Dukes of Argyll, who have retained ownership of the wreck ever since, the ship was carrying the Paychests of the Spanish army, gold coin intended to fund the invasion of England. And that gold, if it exists, is still down there. The Dukes of Argyll have sent salvage expeditions down to the wreck repeatedly over the centuries. In the 1680s, a Swedish salvage team recovered cannons and various artifacts. In the early 1900s, a company called the Pieces of Eight Company mounted a dedicated treasure hunt. More recently, modern diving expeditions have explored the wreck. Cannons have been recovered, timbers, various artifacts from the 16th century, but the gold, nothing confirmed. No treasure chest hauled to the surface, no definitive proof that the Paychests ever existed at all. Which of course only makes the story better. There's something about an unsolved mystery at the bottom of a bay that changes how you look at the water. Standing out here on the pier, looking down into Tobermory Bay, somewhere beneath the surface is a 16th century Spanish warship that's been sitting there for 437 years, surrounded by speculation, legend, and the distant hope of someone's fortune. Even the wildlife here looks like it's been here forever. That juvenile herring gull wandering across the wall has absolutely no interest in us or our historical musings. Seabirds have been working this coastline since long before the Spanish Armada arrived. The beach here is a lovely spot. The island beyond the town is extraordinary. Golden eagles, red deer, otters along the coastline, white-tailed sea eagles that were reintroduced here in the 1970s and have since spread back across much of Scotland. Mull is one of the best places in the UK to see large wildlife without going very far at all. The Hebridean Whale and Dolphin Trust here is worth acknowledging. The waters around Mull are genuinely among the best in Europe for cetacean watching. Minke whales, harbour porpoises, bottlenose dolphins, and occasionally orcas have all been spotted in the Sound of Mull. If you're visiting and you have the time, there are dedicated boat tours that run from the harbour. Tobermory Bakery is ahead on our left. Fresh produce, local baking, the kind of thing that seems simple but represents something important about how a small island community sustains itself. Mull also serves as the main jumping-off point for boat trips out to Staffa, a small uninhabited island about 6 miles off the west coast. It's home to Fingal's Cave, a vast sea cave of interlocking basalt columns that inspired Mendelssohn to write his Hebridean Overture after visiting in 1829. Worth pointing out the cash machine here on the main street. Tobermory is well set up for visitors, but banking facilities on the islands can be limited, so it's handy to know where to find one. Most places on Mull accept card transactions, but you may want to bring cash if you're venturing to more remote parts of the island. And here we've reached the Mull Museum, a genuinely excellent small museum run almost entirely by volunteers. It covers the full sweep of the island's history, from early settlement right through to the 20th century. Small museums like this are doing something culturally vital that often gets overlooked. They're the institutions that decide what gets remembered and what gets lost. The big national museums in Edinburgh and Glasgow have the resources and the profile. But places like the Mull Museum are where genuinely local history is preserved. The specific stories of specific communities that would otherwise disappear entirely within a generation or two. They run on dedication and goodwill, and they deserve to be supported. Tobermory is probably most famous internationally not for its history or its harbour, but for being the filming location of Balamory. The children's TV show that ran from 2002 to 2005 and seemingly implanted itself permanently into the memory of every British person who was between 3 and 8 years old at the time. The coloured houses you've been looking at were the basis for the show's distinctive look. Miss Hooley's house, Spencer's house, the whole thing. It still drives a significant amount of tourism to this day, families coming to walk the same streets. Whether Tobermory entirely loves that association or merely tolerates it probably depends on who you ask. From here, you get one of the better views back along the full length of the main street. Those coloured facades all the way along. It's worth pausing here because the view gives you a sense of the whole plan as Telford conceived it. A single, continuous frontage, uniform in scale, if not in colour, with the hill rising sharply behind it. The colours themselves, incidentally, aren't historically dictated. They're a 20th century development. Originally, the buildings were more uniformly rendered. The riot of colour that makes Tobermory so visually striking and so instantly recognisable came later. The Mishnish, or the Mish as locals tend to call it, is one of those institutions that anchors a community. The kind of pub that has been the centre of social life in a small town for generations. Live music, a genuinely good whiskey selection, and the kind of atmosphere that only comes from a place that's been doing the same thing for a very long time. If you're in Tobermory for an evening, you'll likely end up here. This is also a good moment to mention Tobermory Distillery, which is just along from here and one of the island's most distinctive features. Tobermory single malt has been produced on Mull since 1798, making it one of the older working distilleries in Scotland. They produce two main expressions, the unpeated Tobermory and the heavily peated Lechaig, named after the original settlement that stood here before the British Fishery Society built their planned town over it. Up on the hillside there, you can see the Western Isles Hotel, one of those grand Victorian hilltop hotels that looks like it was placed there entirely to maximise the view, which is more or less exactly what happened. The Victorians discovered the Hebrides in the latter half of the 19th century, partly through the influence of Queen Victoria's very public enthusiasm for the Scottish Highlands. And tourism, or at least a wealthy version of it, has been part of the island's economy ever since. Cafe Fish down here on the waterfront is one of the most celebrated seafood restaurants on the west coast. Locally caught, simply prepared. The kind of food that makes complete sense in the place you're eating it. The queue for a table can be substantial in peak season, so booking ahead is strongly advised. Thanks for watching this walk and talk experience in Tobermory. Please subscribe if you want to see more.